Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. And I rise in strong support of H.R. 6019. Last week's bill to fund the government included a provision added quietly in the dead of night that facilitates the transfer of millions of taxpayer dollars from the United States Treasury to the personal bank accounts of 8 Republican senators. And not just any senators. They were senators who may have had knowledge of or even participated in efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Efforts that culminated in a violent attack on this very institution. Because many of my Republican colleagues seem determined to forget the reality of that day, allow me to remind you that during this attack, Capitol Police officers were maimed while protecting the lives of the very senators now seeking to enrich themselves at the taxpayers' expense. Officers lost eyes, they lost fingers, they suffered traumatic brain injuries and had their spinal discs smashed. One was stabbed with a metal fence stake. Another suffered a heart attack after being repeatedly tased. Some tragically lost their lives. Others were so severely injured that they could no longer continue to serve in law enforcement. The plot to overturn the 2020 presidential election led multiple grand juries, both state and federal, to bring felony charges against its organizers and participants. These charges were based on actions like promoting fake elector slates, urging state officials to find votes to change the election outcome, and urging Vice President Pence to stand just a few feet from here behind that very dais and violate the United States Constitution. According to public reports, one of the 8 Republican senators now eligible for this taxpayer-funded windfall testified before one of those grand juries. At the conclusion of the testimony, that Republican senator reportedly embraced the prosecutor and lauded the work of the grand jurors as cathartic. That same senator announced just yesterday that he intends to seek his payout of tens of millions of dollars from federal taxpayers. It should be clear to everyone here, under no circumstances should the power entrusted to us as members of Congress be used to line your own pockets. Period. Full stop. And anyone who voted for this appalling provision, including all but 2 House Republicans just last week, should feel ashamed of themselves. As these Republican senators and House members know, phone records are among the most routine tools used in criminal investigations. They do not reveal the content of any conversations. They simply show which numbers were called, which numbers called them, and when those calls were made. They are essentially phone bills. If these Republican senators genuinely believe that their civil liberties were violated, or if they are interested in changing the law relating to subpoenas, then they are better positioned than literally anyone on planet Earth to hold hearings, draft legislation, and debate proposed changes in the open. But that's not what this is all about. This is about ensuring the law applies to every other American, just not to them. Let me repeat that. This law applies only to them, not even members of the House of Representatives, nor should it. Not to any other American citizen, just them. This kind of self-serving, self-dealing, one-sided, get-rich-quick scheme at the expense of taxpayers is why Americans are so disgusted with this Congress. And it's why I expect many of those who supported this provision will be dismissed next November. This lucrative carve-out masquerading as legislation isn't an isolated occurrence. It's part of a broader pattern, the weaponization of the Department of Justice in the United States Treasury to reward allies and punish perceived enemies. Let me briefly highlight just a few other examples. Earlier this year, the Trump Department of Justice agreed to a $5 million settlement with an estate of a January 6 rioter who was killed while attempting to violently breach this chamber just outside those doors. As the chief of police of the Capitol Police said at the time, the settlement, quote, sends a chilling message to law enforcement nationwide, especially to those with a protective mission like ours, end quote. According to public reporting, the Department of Justice is also negotiating a settlement of up to $50 million to disgraced former General Michael Flynn over the purported wrongful prosecution, even though he confessed to the crimes for which, incredibly, he now says he was wrongly prosecuted. You can't make this up. Other reports indicate that President Trump is seeking $230 million from taxpayers for himself personally for prior investigations into his conduct. And let's not forget, on day one of this administration, when President Trump issued blanket pardons to over 1,000 criminals convicted of January 6 crimes, including members of the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys who assaulted Capitol Police officers. And just last week, a militia member who participated in the riot was re-pardoned for a completely unrelated gun charge, pardoned twice. And what have we heard from congressional Republicans about all of this? About legalized payoffs to Republican senators? About get-rich-quick schemes unfolding within the federal government? About rewards for friends and retribution against opponents? Absolutely nothing. The silence is deafening. Last I checked, this is the United States Congress, not the Russian Duma. We do not create a protected class of elites who can siphon off public money, reward their friends, punish their political opponents, and insulate themselves from accountability. That's not what we are, or at least we weren't until last week when nearly every single House Republican voted for this disgraceful provision of law after rejecting Democratic amendments to strip it from the bill. You had every opportunity to stop this provision from ever becoming law, but you voted for it anyway. And now you just want to turn around and say, just kidding, we didn't mean it. What are we doing here? Let's review the sequence of events. Senate Republicans snuck this outrageous provision into a bill to reopen the federal government after months of Republicans insisting they would only accept a clean funding bill. I can't tell you the number of times, with all due respect, I heard Speaker Johnson say it over and over again. House Republicans went right along with this. And now, straight-faced, worthy of an Academy Award, they want to pretend the Senate may repeal the very payoff they just made law. As we head into the fourth, and I pray final year of this majority, I didn't think anything could shock me more. I was wrong. The American people are sick and tired of this. They're sick and tired of watching politicians come to Washington to get rich while everyday Americans suffer through an affordability crisis Republicans don't appear interested in confronting. They're sick and tired of watching Republicans block a tax credit that would lower health insurance costs for millions of Americans after passing a partisan budget that will throw millions more off Medicaid, only to turn around and create a slush fund for themselves. I represent Rochester, New York, the city Frederick Douglass chose to make his home and to publish the North Star. Douglass reminded us, the life of the nation is secure only when the nation is honest, truthful, and virtuous. Ask yourselves, is sneaking this self-enriching provision into what was supposedly a clean funding bill honest, truthful, or virtuous? I think we all know the answer. In fact, I'm so opposed to this corrupt provision, I actually voted against it last week. And I look forward to hearing my colleagues on the other side of the aisle try to explain why they did not. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is